Hi there. Hope you have a fantastic day today. This lesson, I will teach you how to graph inverse trigonometric functions. Of course, there is a PDF file version on the description below for you to download so you can work with me. Otherwise, let's go straight into it. First one, we need to graph y is equal to 2 cos inverse of x. And then we need to write down the domain and range for the functions. So in order to do this, first of all, we need to know how to sketch y is equal to cos inverse of x first. So for cos inverse of x, we know that the domain, so the domain of the functions is between -1 and 1. Okay, keep that in mind. And the range of the inverse cos, so let me just write this down, is between 0 and pi. So that is the domain and the range for the inverse cos of x. So let me just sketch the inverse cos of x first. So we know that between -1 and 1. So let's say this is 1 here, -1. And for the domain, it's between 0 to pi. So this is pi over 2 halfway, and this is pi. That's the range. And then we can just quickly sketch this first. So this is cos inverse of x. So now if you look at the graph, so this is still cos inverse of x. So we know that the domain of this is not changed, okay? It's exactly the same. So this domain is the same. But then we know that cos inverse of x, the range is between 0 and pi, okay? So this is 0 and pi. Now these times, we actually 2 times cos inverse of x. So that means the range is actually 2 times that. So we double. So we times 2, and this must be pi times 2 is 2 pi. And 0 times 2 still give me 0. So the range for this now is between 0 and 2 pi. So there you go. So let me just change the y value. So this is, instead of pi over 2, we have pi. And instead of pi, we times by 2, so 2 pi. So there you go. So this is y is equal to 2 cos inverse of x. And this is x, and this is y. So there you go. Now, second one. So we need to sketch y is equal to sine inverse of x. Again, step number 1, we need to sketch y is equal to sine inverse of x first. And then to sketch this, let me just draw the axis first. So this is y, this is x. And we know that the domain for sine inverse of x is between -1 and 1. Okay, keep that in mind for me. And the range for the inverse sine of x is between -pi over 2 and pi over 2. Okay, so please don't forget, okay? Keep that in mind for me. Very important for range and domain for the inverse trigonometry function. And we need to know all of those, yes? Let me just quickly sketch y is equal to sine inverse of x first. So we know that this is 1. And then sine inverse of 1, of course, is pi over 2. So let's say this is pi over 2. And this is 0. And then -1 is pi over 2. So keep that in mind. We need to know how to sketch y is equal to sine inverse of x first, okay? So this is it. So this is sine inverse of x. And you can see this is 3 sine inverse of x. So therefore, the domain is exactly the same. So there is no change for domain. So it's correct. But then we know that the range for sine inverse of x, let me just write this down. Sine inverse of x, I can write in this form. So it's actually between -pi over 2 and pi over 2. But then this time we need to sketch 3 sine inverse of x. So that means the domain is actually 3 times that. So we want 3 times that. So therefore this must time by 3 because we time 3 here and this is time by 3. So therefore the domain of this is negative 3 pi over 2 and this is 3 sine inverse of x and this is 3 pi over 2. So the domain is actually 3 times that. So let me just rewrite. So the range for this is negative 3 pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. That is the range for y is equal to 3 sine inverse of x. So now all I need to do is to change the value, the y value. So this is negative 3 pi over 2. And this is 3 pi over 2. So there you go. This is 3 sine inverse of x. Now third one. So we need to sketch cos inverse of 2x. So let me just draw the axis first. So this is y, this is x. And remember for the domain inverse cos of x is we know that always between -1 and 1 for the domain. And for the range of inverse cos of x, so range is between 0 and pi. So that is the range and the domain of inverse cos of x. Now in this case here, we want to sketch y is cos inverse of 2x. And we know that the domain for the inverse cos is always between -1 and 1. Keep that in mind, okay? We always start from there. And then we want to solve for x, we just divide everything by 2. So we get rid of that. So divide by 2. So now the domain for these functions is actually between a half and negative a half. So that is the domain for these functions. So this is a half. This is negative a half. And then the range is the same because is the coefficients of in front of inverse cos of 2x is 1. So the range is exactly the same. So there's no change for range. So let me just quickly graph inverse cos of x first, okay? So cos inverse of x is we know that this is between 1 and -1. Keep that in mind, okay? And then halfway there, so this is pi, and this is pi over 2, so I just leave it as it is for now. And this is it. So now just join them up. So this is cos inverse of x. So now the domain is changed to -1/2 to a half. So this one here, we should change that into -1/2, and this is a half. And the domain is exactly the same, so just write pi over 2 here. So there you go. This is cos inverse of 2x. And the domain is between -1/2 and half. And range is stay the same, which is from 0 to pi. Okay. Next one. So we need to sketch y is equal to 2 cos inverse of 3x. Again, we just start with y is equal to inverse cos of x first. Okay. Let me just write down the domain for inverse cos of x first. So the domain is between -1 and 1. And the range is between always 0 to pi. And let me just quickly sketch inverse cos of x first. And we can just transform from cos inverse of x to cos inverse of 3x, okay? So this is y, this is x. So this is 1, this is -1. And this is pi over 2. And this is pi. And we just sketch that. So there you go. This is cos inverse of x. But then we need to sketch 2 cos inverse of 3x. So we just need to work out the range and the domain for that. So first of all, the domain, we know that the domain is always between -1 and 1. And we know that this is 3x. So let me just write this down. So 3x is always okay, between -1 and 1. That is the domain for the inverse cos. So therefore, I divide things by 3. So that divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3. That is cancel out. So the domain for this function here is between a third, and this is negative a third, inclusive, okay? So let me just change the domain now. So this is becomes a third and negative a third. Let me just change that to negative a third and a third. So negative a third, and this is a third. And now to work out the range. So for the range for this, so we know that cos inverse of 3x is between 0 and pi. And this time we time by 2. So 2 lots of that. So therefore, this we time by 2. So 2 cos inverse of 3x. So therefore, this must be 2 pi. And 0 times 2 still give me 0. So therefore, the range of this function here is between 0 and 2 pi. So let me just clear this. So now the range, this is 2 pi. So there you go. So now just change the range, the y value. So this is 2 pi. And halfway between, of course, is pi. So let me just write here. So there you go. This is y is equal to 2 cos inverse of 3x. Please pause the video and try this one yourself. Hi there, I'm back. How did you go? So let me go through it with you, okay? Before I do that, please do not forget to give me a thumb up and subscribe if you haven't done so you can help me to grow my channel. So let's get into it. So first of all, we know that the domain of the inverse sine is always between -1 and 1. So we know that inside here must be between -1 and 1. So let me just write this down first. So 3x is always, okay, between -1 and 1. That is the domain for the inverse sine of x or 3x, yes? So now what I do, I divide both sides by 3. So if I divide this by 3 and I divide this by 3, that cancel out. So therefore, your domain should be between -1/3 and 1/3. So that is your new domain for these functions. Now we need to work out the range. And the range for the inverse sine is between -pi and pi. Okay, you need to keep that in mind for me. So sine inverse of 3x is between, this is pi over 2 and this is -pi over 2. But in this case here, we want to work out 2 times that. So therefore, we times this by 2. So we times 2, so this must time by 2, this time by 2. So that cancel out and that cancel out. So therefore, the domain for this function here is between -pi to sine inverse of 3x is less than or equal to pi. So inclusive, okay? So keep that in mind. So let me just write this down. So the range is between -pi and pi. So there you go. So let me just draw it out for you. So this is y, this is x. So remember, for sine inverse, just think about it, okay? It's always between 1 and -1. But in this case here, the new domain is between -1/3 and 1/3. So it's exactly the same, really. Just write 1/3 and -1/3. And it's between -pi over 2 and pi over 2 for sine inverse. So this time, the range is changed from -pi to pi. So that's here. Okay, so -pi, and then this is pi. So there you go. So now we just sketch it. Don't forget a curve to the y-axis, okay? So there you go. This is y is equal to 2 sine inverse of 3x. Please pause the video and try this one yourself. Hi there, I'm back. How do you go? So let me go through it with you, okay? First of all, we just need to work out the range and the domain first. So we know that the domain of the inverse cos is always between -1 and 1. So x over 2, we just work out the domain, okay? So this is x over 2, and we know that between -1 and 1. So now what I do, I just times 2. So because I want to get rid of half, so I times 2. So this must times by 2, this must times by 2. So that -1 times 2 is -2. And this is cancel out. So give me x, and this is 2. So there you go. That's it, the domain. And the range for this, so we know that is cos inverse of x over 2. The range is for the inverse cos is always between 0 and pi. So inclusive, don't forget, this is 0, this is pi. But in this case here, we have 4 times that. So therefore, we times this by 4. So this must times by 4, and this is times by 4. So 0 times 4 is 0. And this is 4 cos inverse of x over 2, and this between 4 pi, because it's pi times 4 is 4 pi. So let me just write down the range and domain first. So the domain now it becomes -2 to 2 instead of -1 to 1, okay? And the range is between 0 and 4 pi. So there you go. So let me just sketch it now. So this is y, this is x. So remember, for inverse cos, so this is normally is 1, but this times is 2. And normally this is -1, but now is -2. And this is halfway, and this is normally is pi, but now is 4 pi. So 4 pi, and this is halfway, so it should be 2 pi. And this is here, and we just join them up. So there you go. So this is y is equal to 4 cos inverse of x over 2. And I hope you got it correct. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.